Sure.
Okay, I think we're good now. Sorry.
Excellent. It happens. Yeah, that's the one thing about these podcasts is we're so reliant on technology these days. Isn't it amazing how much tech is influencing the arts these days?
Oh, absolutely. That was on me, though. I want to make that clear that was my fault. It's my technology.
When anything goes wrong, my son does he's my tech person. I just look over and look at him, even when it's nothing we can control.
Mm-hmm.
It's the internet, or we had an interview with someone from Bologna, a singer, a soprano out there, who's there was something wrong with the internet on her end, and we just couldn't figure it out. But we eventually did, and we just keep on trying. So, Keith, tell us about your development and your growth. How did you start singing? And let's take us back to the beginning of your artistry.
Wow. Okay. Well, I have to say, I started out on trumpet. I was a trumpet player, and I started in 4th grade because my older brother played, and so it just seemed like the logical thing to do. Like, well, Glenn plays, so I'm going to play too. And I did a little bit of singing. I think I did. We had a group at my elementary school. It was the 4th and 5th grade choir, and I did that. I dabbled a little bit. I had always sung a little bit. My mother tells me stories when I was a toddler singing along with the radio, but I didn't really start singing. I don't know, for lack of a better way to put it, for real until I was in high school. And this is the story it's a true story that I always tell, was that I was playing in the pit orchestra for the high school musical. And it's something I had loved doing. It was actually when I had gotten bit by the theater bug, was playing in pit orchestra, going through that whole process, taking from rehearsals until performance. It was super.
It is magic.
Yeah.
It is magic. And once you get the bug, it never changes.
Never changes. And what I would do is I would go out and get the recording of whatever show we were going to do the next year, and I would put it in my Walkman. For those kids that are listening, that we had these things called cassettes, and we put them in the Walkman. And I would listen while I was doing my homework. Or I'd put it on, like a little boombox, and I would listen to the shows. And I would work down. We had a finished basement growing up, and that's where I did all my homework, and I practiced my trumpet. And so I started singing along with the recordings. And after a certain amount of time, I guess I was like, this sounds reasonable, you know. And um, we were doing, what was it? What show was it? We were doing Hello Dolly, my junior year of college. And there are these
It's a great
two,
trumpet book. That's a great trumpet book.
it's a good one. Well, you know, I had kind of blown my lip at trying to do Gypsy the year before. And so Hello Dolly was a little more manageable. And um, so there were these two girls that I had a massive crush on, and they were auditioning for the All Shore Chorus. I grew up in Monmouth County, New Jersey, and so we had the All Shore conference, and they were auditioning for All Shore Chorus, and so I was like, I'm going to audition for that too, and nothing ever happened with them, but I scored really high on that on that audition, and so it just made me curious. It just made me curious about singing. I was still very much a trumpet player, um, but I secretly wanted to be on stage, I think. And so we moved from New Jersey to Hilton Head, South Carolina, for my senior year of high school, and they didn't have enough people for a pit orchestra for their show, and they were also short on guys. And so they said, well, you know, we're just doing a piano, so we're not going to have a pit, but you know, we really need guys for the show. Could you come out for the show? And so I auditioned for the show. They were doing South Pacific, and they cast me as Emile Debec. And
It's a
so,
dream role there for sure.
it was great. They graded my temples, and I think I wore one of my dad's yellow blazers, and and so I did South Pacific, and you know, like I said, I had already been bit by the bug playing trumpet, but I mean, this was really amazing, and it was easier. I noticed that it was easier. Somehow I was, you know, my 16-year-old, 16, 17-year-old self, I was noticing how I was impressing a lot more people with a lot less work. And so I thought maybe there's something to this.
I think it's something when you find what you're meant to do, it just kind of the chips just fall into place and just makes sense.
Yeah, you know, my passion was jazz music. I was a wannabe jazzer, and listening to Miles Davis, and we wanted to play like that, and Lee Morgan. Anyway, but the singing I could do that really well, and that was the sort of the beginning. And I did some summer stock the following summer, and then when I got into college, I was sort of back on the trumpet, and I did some shows at school. Finally, I did a summer stock production on Hilton Head the summer after my junior year of college, and that was when it was sort of been a progression. People who were singers, people who had been opera singers or whatnot, they would encourage me. You know, you should study. But that was the summer where it was like, no, for real, you need to go, when you go back to college, you need to start taking voice lessons because you have a serious instrument. And then one thing led to another, and the next thing I knew, I was putting together graduate school audition rep. So that's how it started.
So where'd you go to graduate school, and how'd you get into that performing the young artist circuit?
Well, first I want to say I went to my undergrad at the University of Richmond, and I studied with Dr. Jennifer Cable. Graduate school, I went to the New England Conservatory, and I studied with Richard Hughes. And that was when I really began to learn what it was that was expected. But at the same time, I sort of had this blissful ignorance, you know. I had only been taking voice lessons for a few years, but I heard about the Metropolitan Opera competition, and so I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and went for it. And it did the New England regional auditions. I made it to I think it was the finals or the semifinals. And then the following year, my second year of grad school, I made it to nationals, and I was a winner back when they had 10 winners. all along I've been doing summer programs. Um, I was dating a girl who was going to BU at the time that I was going to NEC, and she said, "You need to come out to the Music Academy of the West." It was where Marilyn Horn um, started that program, and the idea of going to a summer festival hadn't even entered my mind. But my girlfriend said, "You need to audition for these people," and I just went, "Okay," you know, and then um, that was a humbling experience, and I was happy to get back to New England Conservatory where I had people that I knew, and um, um, then I had done the Met competition, and then after that I went to Juilliard. I went to the Juilliard Opera Center, um, and that's, I guess, when things started to um, it started to snowball. I had done the Aspen Music Festival. Um, Between that and the Met competition, just your name starts getting out there, and now I'm in New York, and so people from City Opera could come over to Juilliard and hear me, and that's of course things are changing now. Things are changing a little bit now.
Certainly,
but,
right these days.
but it was that I guess that was what I at least used to tell people. It's what I still tell people now. They're interested in pursuing a career, is that to get where people are going to hear you. Um, yeah,
A major city, with a large opera company, a large opera industry is very important.
right. And so that was being in New York, going to the summer festivals. That was huge, because then just everybody could hear you. Everybody could hear you.
What are some of the things you so when you won the Met competition? What was it like to sing on the stage as a young person? What was it like to take that stage for the first time?
I mean, they talk about. I remember a couple of Olympics ago, they were talking about some gymnasts who were of a questionable age. I think they had there was an accusation that some of them might have only been about 12 years old. Um, and, and the reason why that was not the reason why that was not cool was because they hadn't learned fear yet. They they just did what they were told, and that's kind of how I felt. I think I was like I mentioned before. I had this blissful ignorance, and I guess I had confidence in my voice, um, and so I just went and did it, and it was on an acoustic level, on a technical level. What I remember about that house was that my brain was telling me to push. That it's such a huge house that I had to, like flex every muscle in my body. Um, but then there was something about the acoustic in the hall that took all of that tension away, and then I could actually hear the voice sort of soar into the hall, and then I knew immediately I could just sing. That's no,
Must have been amazing after that first couple notes, right? To get that confidence, get your sea legs. What did you sing for the final round?
I okay. Oh gosh, one of the big arias I did for competitions was um, Belcore's aria from Elixir of Love, Come pari
Fun.
de vezzoso, and I was singing. I think I sang Donne mie from Così fan tutte. It was such baby baritone rep. I mean, it really was. Um, Nothing went above an F or an F sharp. And then, oh gosh, I forget what it was I would have sung. I think I had Harlequin from Ariadne auf Naxos, Lieben Hassen. Um, when we had done the competition, and the winners were going to do the winners concert. A memo came down saying he needs to sing something a little more serious, I guess, for the Met stage. And so they asked if I would do O du mein holder Abendstern from I'm like,
Wow.
and so, but even then I was like, well, no, okay, they tell me to do it, I'm going to do it. And so that's what I sang. I sang Del Core and I sang Wolfram.
That'll get you. That's a heck of a stretch. That's exciting.
And I rushed. I remember, I think Del Core went fine, and then I got to the Wolfram, and I couldn't sustain those lines yet. And so I remember I rushed, but it's Met Orchestra. They'll follow you.
One of the greats. We've had a couple of the Met Orchestra musicians on the show, and it's always a delight to talk to my colleagues who play in that magnificent ensemble.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah.
Nothing like it. Every time I go to the Met, I'm just like, oh,
Right.
It's like a dream orchestra. So, what was it like to take the stage as a principal artist of the Met a couple of years later?
Well, that was a different situation. I was covering. I was covering in a triple bill that they did called Parade. All right, and it was Poulenc's Mamel de Theresias and a Satie ballet, I think, called Parade, and then L'Enfant et les Sortilèges. Those are the three pieces.
Got one popular one and then two very unusual choices.
Yeah,
Interesting.
we had done Mamel in grad school, so I was familiar. But it was a whole long story. I was initially covering. Are you familiar with Mamel?
No, I've never conducted that
All
one.
right. So I was initially covering one of the smaller baritone roles, and there had been some shuffling. Somebody was supposed to do something and they weren't doing it, and so the guy that I was covering got moved up, but they kept me as a cover, so I didn't get I didn't get moved up in Mamel. I was also covering the Black Cat in L'Enfant, and the man I was covering canceled. He had a family emergency, and he canceled. Now the day that he canceled was a broadcast.
Oh no!
It was a broadcast, and so I knew that I was going to be covering from the house anyway, and what was also happening that day was that it was the day that St. Patrick's Day was being celebrated in New York, and so my girlfriend at the time and I thought, well, let's go check out the St. Patrick's Day parade. I have to be at the house anyway to cover, so I didn't even have my phone on, and so we were there for about 15-20 minutes, and I finally said, I better get over there now. And I turned my phone on, and I had like 70 messages.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm just kidding. It was about 5. I had about 5 new messages, and they were
Call us back right away.
they were all from the same guy at rehearsals, or the rehearsal office at the Met. Each message sounding more stressed and agitated
Higher
than the
pitch.
previous one. Oh my God,
Wow.
and so I'm like running across Central Park on the diagonal, trying to get over to Lincoln Center, and I got in and it was fine. But yeah, it was a weird experience because the way they staged that L'Enfant was that most of us were singing on the edges of the proscenium, and they had some dancers that were actually doing the movement for the role on the stage. And so I was one of those folks who wasn't really doing any staging. I was just on the side. And
One of my dear colleagues, it was Thomas Woodman. We did a Brahms Requiem together. Thomas made his debut at the Met. They told him the day of, they get in here early. He was doing Wolfram. That was his Met debut.
wow.
He had no rehearsal. He just
Oh,
get
yeah.
up there.
Well, and so this was the next thing was that, of course, I'm like, okay, I knew my music. It was really just a bunch, it's meowing. The Black Cat is meowing. So like I didn't have to worry about my French. But there was an A flat in there, which is not easy. But that was going to be fine. And it's Ravel, and so it's going to be a little tricky. And I'm not going to lie to you, um, it was so was James Levine conducting, and
No pressure.
I'm like, you're me looking at Levine, and this is Levine. He's like writing his score. He's writing his score, and and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I mean, I never been in that kind of situation before. And so
Well,
I
I
remember
see.
I rushed. I got ahead of him, and I felt like it. But I got the Met debut. I got on a broadcast. So
Exciting.
I,
Now you've sung at almost all the major companies in the United States. You've done roles. You're known for singing bel canto roles, but you're also incredibly known for modern 20th century pieces. That's really become a niche for you that you've been engaged with for much of your career. How did you? What was your first modern piece that really told you wanted to do a lot of that rep?
well, you know, I got to think about this for a second. Um, it's funny. I'm seeing this now. I I remember I did the Tucker uh, competition auditions, Tucker auditions, and I remember getting some feedback from a judge, and he said we just don't know what to do with you, and I'm like, okay.
Hire me.
He's like, we just don't know what to do with you. If it were the 1950s and 60s and we were still doing, anyway, blah 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 blah. We don't know what to do with you. I think I got my first new music engagements because um, I looked the part. To be honest, I think they were looking for someone young, and and they thought, you know, oh, whatever. Keith's nice looking, has a nice voice. He looks the part, and we're gonna hire him for this. And that was the first couple of opportunities. You do, especially when you're doing summer festivals too. They do a lot of new music. Um, but at the same time, I had been studying with W. Stephen Smith when I was at Juilliard, and Steve really, I felt like he kind of set me free. That I could sing the vowel that was there instead of trying to make the most rounded baritonal bell tone I could possibly make. I felt like with Steve, I was able to start sounding like a person on stage. And, one step further, I remember several years later, I was doing the premiere of Elmer Gantry. And I remember Herschel Garfien, the librettist, was coaching with me, and I had to sing a hymn. There's a hymn that they composed for the opera. Um, and it's a very intimate moment. And he's like, okay, go ahead. And I start singing it. And like I just went into baritone mode. Like I'm gonna sit like American baritone mode. And he's like, "What are you doing?" Because I'm like, "Oh, had I wings, Sharon," which is fine because it's fine, but it's like it's got a thing that's not necessarily me. It's like I'm
An
singing.
affect. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, basically, like there's another way to do this. You could just sing it like you're there in the scene. Um, there's been this progression, I feel like, where for the past 15 years or so, where I've tried everything I could do to just be a person on stage, without the affect. And I think some people like that, and I think that's there've been I think that's a reason why I it's a reason why I do and do not get work. I mean, frankly, um, but it lends itself to the contemporary music, because generally the composers and the librettists would like their words to be understood, and they would like them to sound like words that um, the words we say when we speak them. Um,
That's really profound because these are often these are American composers. They're writing in English, and they don't want to hear Tito Gobi try to sing that role.
it's
I mean,
yeah,
it's
um, and I can't say they're not all of that opinion. I think some would rather you be like an instrument, um, but yeah, I think that has something to do with it. Is that I you know I'm conscientious about how the words sound, how the sentences sound. This idea of singing in sentences, and trying to strip away the artifice of it. And again, it's a reason why I do get hired, and it's a reason why I don't. Because sometimes the sounds are not always like you would hear on a recording of an Italian opera, and that spooks some people.
how freeing is it to bring a new role to life? We have no, that's one of the most interesting things about being an opera singer. Is you have 200 or 300 years of accumulated performance practice and great artists who've sung those roles. What's it like bringing a role to life?
You said it. Is that I don't feel the weight of the hundreds of years of tradition. Um, that I get to. It's a clean slate. It's a clean slate, so I get to focus on the scene and the story and the text and the music, and I get to sing it with my voice, and go from there. I mean, I think I don't have percentages here, but I would say that most of any vocal problems I've ever had have come from my singing in a style where I felt like it had to be a certain way. Um,
Interesting.
I mean, even into my 40s, taking on a Verdi role here, or some of the more dramatic bel canto, I still have that 25-year-old in my brain who's like, no, it needs to sound. You need to sound like a Verdi baritone, and then all of a sudden
Insert
I'm like,
name
why
here.
can't I make it through this one line? Because I'm adding color, I'm adding, all this posturing, and
Weight,
yeah,
adding artificial weight. Yeah,
yeah.
it's amazing that now that you must teach your students these things, and because it's so natural for a student to listen to great recordings and walk into the lesson and try to sound like Nikolai Getta or try to sound like whichever voice they're listening to. How do you get your students to find their voice and not try to imitate so much?
Well, it's funny because it depends on the student, and I have, one of the reasons why I got into teaching was because I guess I got frustrated enough with just some of the approaches that I had heard to contemporary American opera that I thought maybe I can affect change this way. Because I'm not going to go up to a colleague and say, you got to stop singing like you're doing an impression of an opera singer, and
That probably wouldn't go over so well.
yeah, and um, I was doing the same thing when I was starting out. So I can't, I'm not gonna. I get that, um, but sometimes I'm finding that I'll have a student, and I'm in my brain. I'm like, why can't you just do an impression of an opera singer? I would, um, you know, I find what I am teaching. Um, I have a lot of students who are music education majors, and they come from choral backgrounds, and so they're told to blend. They have to blend, 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 and they have to sing in a group where they have a unified vowel sound, and so I'm introducing them to their solo voice basically, um, and what I have found, one of the most common causes for reluctance is um, they're afraid that they're going to sound annoying. So they've been used to singing, oh, and on an ah vowel. Like I'll say, go ahead, let's just do an ah vowel, ah, and they'll go, oh. I'm like, no, ah, just ah, and I give them examples of different words, and it'll still be covered in very breathy, and then I'll go, no, I want you to think really bright, and they're afraid they're going to sound like the worst stereotype of a musical theater singer, and so and they'll do it, and I'm like, that's it, you got it, and they have this look on their face like they're not so sure, and I'm like, they're like, oh, I say, oh, okay, you think you sound like this. Ah, and they're like, yeah, I think I sound like that. Um, but it's
That's why those ears, the great the mentor's ears have to be there. No one can hear themselves, and I know so many of our great colleagues who have teachers and coaches up until the day they stop singing. I mean, it's so important that you have outside ears monitoring you as you go about your career.
it's
And
true. It's true. You have to have, or at least be able to listen to yourself on recording. And I've never,
we all do. Whether it's a conductor or a singer, we all hate watching ourselves.
mm,
I see every. Why did I make that face or do that gesture? That didn't affect the sound. Or
hmm hmm
but it's that self criticism is why I think it's really important part of maintaining a career.
yeah, yeah. And you know, to find that balance of analytical thought, but also being able to compartmentalize that and okay, no, I'm gonna try to stay in the moment and just sing and just let it go, to let singing be an in the moment activity. Um, that's been a challenge since having started teaching, is that I think about singing more. I think about what I'm doing more. And sometimes it's great if I learn things, and then sometimes it just gets in my way. Um, um, yeah, yeah. And getting older too, you start to lose flexibility. And and so, I feel like my technique is better now. Um, because I've had to learn how to sort of paint myself out of some corners. Um, yeah.
So you're finding your teaching is adding so much more to your singing, to your thought process of how you do your art, even
I think so,
because you've
yeah.
been doing it for so many
And
years.
I think it just shows me the options that I have too. That, I used to think everything had to be loud all the time. I'm realizing there are certain things that I can do that are not as loud but still cut. Um, learning about those options and that nuance. That
We have our
the
first
way
question from the
that,
audience, Donna
okay,
from
I can
Akron,
bring this
Ohio.
color
Oh, sorry.
um,
Finish that.
into
Finish that
into
statement.
a
Sorry.
song or into a particular section of an aria. And maybe 10 years ago, I thought, oh, there's no way I can do that. That's falsetto, or that's fake singing. Um, but having the, having the courage to go back and listen to myself on recordings, um, um, in big houses, and then I can, it's, you have to kind of rip the bandage off and just listen to yourself, and then you
Well,
can learn.
taking risks has got to be such an important part of being an artist. Is if everything is safe, it's always. So there's some artists who are just always safe, and they just never move me in the way that I want to. I want to see. I want to see an artist take risks. I think it's really important.
I think absolutely. And I think that's another thing that I with students, um, trying to encourage them to take risks, to risk making an ugly sound, um, and that in order to do it, in order to be successful, you have to tinker. You have to try to play around, practice the vocalizing instead of just learning your music for your rep requirement. I used to, when I was in graduate school and college too. I mean, that was, I would just sing. I would sing through stuff. I would vocalize. I would do the exercises my teacher gave me. But at the same time, when I came into my vocal study, I was already wanting to make those kinds of noises. So
We have a question from Donna from Akron, Ohio, and she asks, "How has your vast knowledge of the contemporary opera affected your performances of the standard operas?"
well, I have to shift gears a little bit. Um, I started out learning standard repertoire. I mean, that's what you get. And when I was in school, see, it was before. There's been an explosion of contemporary repertoire, um, um, in the past 10, 20 years. When I was in school, that hadn't quite. We didn't have very many options. It was like you did Bob's aria. There was some Argento you could do, Passatieri. There, for a really young baritone, there wasn't a lot of that stuff. A lot of the contemporary stuff was for bigger, more mature voices. Um, Now, so let me just make sure I'm understanding the question correctly. How does my contemporary opera experience inform my standard repertoire, or is it how does it affect it?
Yeah, both. And has one helped the other? Has the contemporary approach that you've adapted enhanced or expanded what you do with the when you reapproach the roles that the Mozart and the Verdi?
Yeah, well, it works both ways. It helps it, and then sometimes I have to watch it because when I'm singing in my own language, in my own vernacular, so really when I'm singing an American piece, a piece that's in an American vernacular as opposed to Britain, um, then I feel like I can get really into the text and um, and that on a technical level, like my air flows more freely because I'm just saying the vowels. Um, that can you know that can help my standard repertoire because I'm more attentive to the text. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But it's different music. So I find this is in my opinion that well, it's not just my opinion. In standard repertoire, you have more legato vocal lines. Um, it's a different kind of music. Um, and so sometimes I have to modify those vowels. The languages are different also. Um, just to in short that the I don't I can't quite get the same I can't quite get away with the same type of nuance in standard repertoire that I can get away with in American repertoire, and it's because those aren't my languages. I mean, I think when it comes down to it, um, um, I describe them as I'm still dealing with like a filter. Like here's the French filter, or here's the Italian filter, here's the German filter, um, and so it's a little tricky. I find I have to rely a little more on my on my I should say older technique. Have to modify the vowels a little bit in certain places and let my air flow more. But it's not too tough. It takes me about a week or two to kind of readjust. Like, okay, I'm in standard, say, bel canto rep, for instance, um, and the good thing is that I went to school. I learned all these rules about diction and so that the training clicks back in. But yeah, there's a shift. There's a shift. So it helps it, but I have to be careful.
Great question, and yeah, it's an interesting approach to hear someone who's done so much of the contemporary and then goes back and forth, and it's fascinating music. What's the hardest role you've had to do in all your if you had to pick one of the hardest roles you've had to portray?
Oh, hardest roles. Oh gosh. Well, okay. Um, I mean, they can be difficult in different ways. One of
Of course.
the hardest I've ever worked was singing Danilo in Merry Widow.
Mm.
We were doing a Dottie Danner production and lots of dancing. Lots. I think I lost 10 pounds
I
doing
was supposed to work with her 2 years ago, and she fell off the stage 2 weeks before the rehearsal process began. Poor
Oh
thing.
gosh.
Isn't that terrible?
She's amazing. She actually had to go leave for a week to have surgery in the middle of staging. It was planned, and she came back, and she has this. I mean, the Merry Widow that she's done is famous, and a lot of people know the show, and so it took kind of a village to take her place to teach us how to do all this stuff. So that's the hardest I've ever worked. It's also high, and it's also a lot of dialogue, and she wants it a certain way. Um, Sort of classic movie delivery, and in some way, I always go back to that Merry Widow, where like talk about being out of my comfort zone, um, um, and and just trying something new and just working and working and working. Um, there have been some contemporary operas that border on unsingable, and I've had to try. Um, I did an opera where um, the composer was a big Wagner fan, um, but he was writing new music, and he really loved to do these octave jumps.
Ooh.
And you would have a recit line with just, you know, yeah da 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 da, and
Like a yo-yo.
yeah, and you've got this almost Wagnerian orchestra underneath you, and you're trying to
Maintain consistency. Sure, that's
and
challenging.
get the words out, and that can be a real voice wrecker. But you know, I never felt like I was ever in the middle of a show where I thought my voice is going to break or something like that. I mean, um, I've had some close calls, um, but yeah, I go back to that Merry Widow. Anything operetta is hard
Who would have thought that it's hard to do well for
without
sure?
a microphone. And that was the other thing I didn't mention, was that we were trying to get this text over without microphones, and so that's a whole different way of delivering dialogue. You know, I can't do it.
Have you gone back and forth to musical theater? Have you been asked to do much musical theater in your career?
Generally only when opera companies do it.
Well, that makes sense. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't done. There's actually a funny story about this mic situation that relates to the Sweeney Todd clip. If I may tell that really quickly.
Oh, please do.
So this is City Opera. This is the one that Mark Delavan was in, and so we were at the State Theater in New York, which was built for ballet. It was built to muffle sound,
Notoriously difficult acoustic.
and they wanted, we had a mix of classical singers and Broadway singers, and so they mic'd to compensate for the acoustical issues in the theater, but also to get dialogue out. And they had the budget for it, and so we could be mic'd. And we were mic'd while we were singing too. And there is a scene in Sweeney Todd. They call it the Joanna walkaround scene, and this is where Sweeney just starts slitting throat after throat after throat. It starts out with Anthony Hope in the balcony reprising the Joanna theme, and so he's up at the balcony. It starts out, I feel you, Joanna, and I had been doing it sort of that, that sort of mixed, almost like falsetto-y kind of light thing. And a sound engineer came up to me during break, and he said, "Hey, Anthony, great job. Look, you just sing with your voice into that mic. I don't think that you have to back off because you have a mic," which, for a young baritone, I was like a knife in my heart.
That was a choice you made.
So I need to
carefully practice.
I can, even with a mic, and so I start getting all frazzled, and I go up to do the scene again, and I just start going, I feel, and so we stop, we finish the scene, we're about to go on another break. It was George Manahan conducting, and he says, before we break, Keith, I have a note from Stephen, not so stentorian. And I didn't understand until after he had said that who Stephen was. So it was Stephen Sondheim.
Wow.
Who I didn't know was in the house. And so I'm walking off going, I blew it, and anyway, that's the Sweeney Todd story. So yeah, mics, when I have a microphone, I feel like a dog in sneakers,
It's a opera, opera musical theater. They have similarities. There's certainly many differences. That's and it's really hard for opera singers who are trained to sing with them to make that switch.
And this is sort of the story of, especially the past. How many months has it been since we started sheltering?
March.
That's been the story of, like, you have points in your career where you look back to what you were trained to do, and you're thinking, I wasn't trained to do this.
I say that every day about pretty much
I
everything.
wasn't trained to do this. This is not, and I wasn't trained to use my voice like this. Um, and so yeah, microphones. I'm learning a lot about microphones these days. That's that's for sure.
Now, when you teach students who are primarily interested in musical theater, how do you modify the technique? Do you modify the technique, or how do you approach that musical theater technique
Well,
versus
I
legit technique?
what I teach everybody um, is to try to get their body engaged, so that they're not letting all of this take over and try to manage their airflow that way. I'm trying to teach them how to sing in a line to keep the sound going and to keep the air flowing, and you need to engage your body to do that. And most people that are new um, to vocal study just aren't aware of that. And especially with a lot of the Broadway that's out there right now that's popular, it's practically all spoken, and so
Yeah, the rock Broadway is totally a different technique.
yeah, and so they don't have to. It's almost as though they don't really have to ever hold a note out. So that's what I'm. That's what I feel like most of my teaching is trying to like show them that they need to keep their sound going and keep their air flowing to finish phrases, to lengthen vowels, but also sing through.
A lot of the best Broadway artists I've worked with in the course of my travels, like Christine Ebersol, for one, I worked with her a couple of years ago. She sings with beautiful legato. I
Yep.
mean, it's the core is excellent technique, and regardless of genre, it's just the way maybe the resonance is produced may be different, but it's not the core technique.
Yeah, it's and that's I'll find myself trying to explain that. It's like, okay, I understand how this recording might sound, but it requires a little more energy and more work on your part. Um, and so yeah, I don't feel like my technique um, works counter to musical theater singing. I mean, it's really all about um, just trying to find resonance and airflow and getting your body engaged.
We got another question. This is from Erica from Los Angeles, and she asks, "Have you gotten to do Emile Debec again?"
No,
Oh, that's a shame.
I had an audition. There was an opportunity to audition um, for the Broadway run of it. This was 10 years ago, but I was in the middle of a gig, and I couldn't do it. I don't know what I would have done with myself. Um, at that
That's a lot of Emile Debecs.
Oh my gosh. Well, no, I mean, I think just the imposter syndrome of getting on up there, and but I would love to. I would love to. There's a ton of musical theater I would love to sing. But
Put it out there into the universe.
yeah, put it out there.
What are some of the dream roles?
Musical theater?
Sure. Or opera.
Well, let me see. I've actually been fortunate. I've done a lot of the opera dream roles that I have. All my opera dream roles are weird stuff that nobody ever does anyway.
Give us a couple.
I want to sing the gendarme in Les Mamelles de Thérèse.
Ooh.
Not the gendarme. Sorry. I've done the gendarme. The director in Mamelle. There's a beautiful prologue, this amazing prologue to Mamelle. It's the role is the director. I want to sing the director in Mamelle. I would love to do Wozzeck. I don't know if it's quite my voice type, but I would love to do Wozzeck.
That'd be a fun challenge. Have you done anything atonal, like purely atonal, like the Berg?
I did one of the apprentices in Wozzeck. There's a scene, sort of this lay preacher scene of these two drunk men, and the bass is the lay preacher, and then he's got a buddy, and I was the buddy, and so I had about 2-3 pages. And it's I had been listening to so much jazz music, especially in a lot of more, for lack of a better way to put it, abstract and avant-garde sort of free.
Experimental, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
and so I had those sounds in my ears. It wasn't to learn something 12-tone or some kind of surrealist piece wasn't that daunting. and so it's almost harder for me to learn Strauss than it is to learn something that's atonal, um, because just the way that because Strauss is tonal, even though it's always changing, even though it's so dramatic. But Broadway dream rolls, oh gosh, somebody, this is um this sounds like I'm dropping names, but I was last time I did Candide, Hal Prince actually came in and directed a lot of the rehearsals, and
Wow.
um he's like, you know what show you need to do? You need to do She Loves Me. Um so yeah, I don't know, I'm not familiar with the show.
But by the recommendation of Hal Prince, why
Yeah,
not?
Emile Debec would be amazing to do. I would love to do Sweeney. I would love to do Little Night Music. Those would be dream roles. I mean, as far as
Such great.
opera,
Sondheim is such a wonderful composer. It's so organic and so interesting and unique.
it's amazing. I mean, it's just like this is the stuff that like was the early inspiration for.
Did you get to meet him and talk to him during that run?
Not really, just in passing. Just in passing. I didn't get a chance to speak to him. But as far as opera, I would like to do like a big war horse before I finally wrap it up. Because I've done so much contemporary stuff. I'd like to do like a Don Carlo or some huge Verdi or Wagner opera. That would be fun.
Well, it's so great to have this conversation with you. And let's take a look at we started getting into the effects of COVID on our industry. Of course, there's the obvious lack of work for everybody in the music industry and the arts industry. But what are some of the ways that COVID-19 has changed your day-to-day work?
Well, I do a lot more recording. I've done a lot more recording than I ever did. And um, a lot more listening to myself. We spoke about this before. Um, I'm trying. It's hard to know where to start. Not just the teaching. I have been doing some video teaching before COVID because I had to teach some Skype lessons during a gig. Um, but mastering that technology, as a singer, it's I think learning what I can do with a microphone. And I've done recordings before, but those have been cases where I sing and then you let the sound guy take care of it, and then that's it. But this is where I had to actually listen to myself and change some levels, and having to sing with a monitor. Like, talk about a dog in shoes. That's
I'm going to steal that analogy, by the way.
yeah, that is another thing I was not trained to do was to sing with anything in my ears. And to trust that you're doing things the right way is really hard. I'm like Goldilocks when it comes to acoustics, and if I don't feel like I have the right sound in a certain space, it takes me a little while to adjust and to feel confident about what I'm doing. So it's like when I remember doing Western Opera Theater tour, just right when I was just starting to work, and you get used to change. You get used to being in different acoustics. You get used to having a different setup, a different space, and you just roll with it. And it's a similar situation now. It's like, well, this is the situation, and so we just do the best we can.
The word of the day is pivot.
Yep.
We all pivot, make things work, do our best. I know for me, it's been keeping my musical communities intact that I serve, and a lot of things that I'm used to doing of all, like large masterworks. Nope. I was supposed to be making several European debuts. Nope. But then finding what's keeping my communities together has been the primary focus of a lot of my teaching and my conducting. So
Right.
we just find ways to make it work in different directions.
It's been amazing how much of a need there has been. I never post stuff of my own. Hardly ever. I'm just too insecure. But when my friend Paul Salerni wrote these pieces, and he asked me to record them. We did one of these Zoom style pieces. Um, he had his son do a marimba track, and then I did a vocal track, and then he mixed them together, and then I lip synced over it, and he really wanted to put it out. And granted, the poetry was actually appropriate for the time. It basically this had to do with this new life where we're separated, and and um, so we posted it, and it was unbelievable the response that it got. That it just showed me that people are hungry for music and to hear people sing and play, um, which is it's just it gives me a lot of hope and a lot of optimism.
Where can people find out more about your work, Keith?
More about my work,
your career, your work, your teaching. Where can people find out more about you?
Oh wow, I'm so terrible at this. I have a website.
Yes, you do, and I'm gonna put the website address on the screen as you read.
It could use a little zhuzhing. You know, we still are doing performances here at Bowling Green. I just did my faculty recital, and I
was so delighted to see that, and congratulations on that. Anytime I see my artist colleagues and friends performing, it makes me so happy to see people take on that stage.
It's you know, I had been taking it for granted because I mean I've been teaching in person. We do 30 minutes, and then we go 30 minutes outside. So like I get to sing, you know, I get to sing. I got to do a faculty recital. We had no audience, but I got to be in a beautiful hall with a beautiful acoustic and make music with an amazing pianist, Kevin Bilsma, and so I'm just lucky. I'm lucky, and I'm grateful that I still get to do. I still got to do this, and it's fun, especially if you're doing mostly teaching in any given period. You know, it's like I have a need to sing. I obviously have a need to sing, and I imagine that you know all the other singers do too. Like it's just something that you want to you need to. I can't imagine not having an opportunity, not having that outlet to make music.
What's it going to be like when we get back to performing again?
Oof, that's a $1 million question. I mean, there's going to be a lot more online content. I mean, I think that's not going away, and they are going to continue to refine that. I mean, I think even here at BG, they had already been streaming recitals here on their YouTube channel. But this year, you know, BG has this wonderful new music festival that we do here every year. Mid-America Center for Contemporary Music. And they bring in people from all over. Of course, this year it was virtual. But our engineers were able to actually make a production out of the performances, and so I look forward to that, having the technology and the expertise at our fingertips to make a product instead of having to just take this and put it on a although sometimes this is more reliable.
Yeah, they're incredibly advanced devices. I just did a virtual choir Messiah for the Lincoln Center. The National Chorale does it every year, and it's usually in Lincoln Center. But this year it's going to be virtual, and he's got choirs from all over the world. I was one of them, and I had 70 of my singers from different places all over the place, and record "And the Glory of the Lord" with their cell phones, send it in, put it all together. My son does the tech and the audio, and we put these things together, and it's they can sound incredibly well. It's like taking a puzzle that you don't know the picture of, smashing it up and throwing it on the floor, and then putting it back together. Exactly. I have no idea what it's going to sound like until I hit play after it's done.
It's daunting enough for me to think of just trying to match a piano part with a vocal part, but in doing this work with my friend Paul Salerni, I just decided to play around with it one day, and they have these apps now that you can take a vocal track, you can take a marimba track, and once you figure out how the app works, just kind of go, and then it sounds almost like it was intentional.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, where technology is going to take music in the next decade is going to be pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I think we're already seeing like the Met auditions this year being done virtually.
Yep.
And, we were mentioning Karen Delavan before. She was talking about she's recording it for people who are in the semifinal. She's recording their accompaniments. And how do you get the recits to line up? It's like she was saying, the singers sing it for me. I count it off in seconds. Then I put that together and we try to. I mean, things that are so easy when you're in the room with a pianist or an orchestra become so much harder because you have to memorize an interpretation or something strange like that. It's going to be there's learning curve for all of us, I think.
Yeah, and it'd be amazing to return to the I hope it doesn't all all of these new discoveries. I hope we don't need them all, but yeah.
Or we can be on Zoom a few hours less a day.
I know. That's the other thing is that I have a device that I think I'm not alone. That these devices were not built for constant video conferencing.
Yeah, I think internet usage has been way up, and we're trying to just struggle. I mean, my students, I have 37 students on a server. They're all saying like, I have this today I had an internet issue, and I usually take them at their word. But that's the go-to answer now is the dog ate my homework. Now it's the dog ate my internet.
Right. I haven't gotten that yet. What I have gotten is that I may have been I have a friend who may have been exposed to COVID, so I can't come to my lesson today. And then immediately, are you okay? How do you feel? Can I see you on Skype or Zoom? And then of course it's crickets because they've already.
Well, I think everyone's been, apparently this disease is so rapidly spread that there's going to be, it's so omnipresent.
It's frightening. I'm happy that it looks like there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, we'll start that. Fingers crossed that vaccine comes out soon and is in circulation, and that we can get back to a new chapter of the next level of music making in America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Keith, thank you so much for joining us today. Really is a pleasure to catch up with you.
Thanks
Continued success in all your singing and your teaching. And shout out to our dear friend Katie Procht. We miss her at Ocean Grove and everywhere. She's delightful, and we wish you both the best.
Thank you so much, Jason. Miss you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters 2020. Thank you, and please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that bell icon. Our next show will be next Sunday, then December 13th, with Joy Hermelin, a Broadway and opera veteran, who will be joining us. And remember, keep music alive. Good night.